Hello, I'm Penny Thornton, and welcome to my astrological take on the week, my view of Christmas week. Actually, it's going to be a lot more than that because instead of just this one video, I'm going to be doing a couple. And the reason is I'm taking a very important subject, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. I'm going to stretch it over a few videos because it's so important. And I think doing it in a couple of bites is probably going to be the right thing to do. Now, in terms of this being the threshold of a new year, I have done individual forecasts for all the signs on my audio. So if you go to my website and click on the audio tab, you'll be able to hear your year ahead. It's a 10-minute podcast, so to speak, so plenty of information there. And of course, you'll be able to get your individual sun sign year as well. I tend to use my videos here not for that. I try to give us a broader view of the astrology. I like to take us in a little deeper so that we look at the kind of mechanics of astrology in terms of global events and what the cycles of the planets mean and all those kind of things that give us this much broader look at astrology. And I hope what I do in the process is give you a much better idea of how useful astrology is, what an important lens it is through which to look at the world and how we are moving through the world. So this coming week, perhaps the most important thing about it is we have our very own Christmas star. And that means we have a solar eclipse and it is conjunct the planet Jupiter. And that's a really rather marvelous event. It's certainly in terms of interpretation. Now, you will be able to see the solar eclipse if you live in the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, or you are in Indonesia or Malaysia. You'll be able to see it. But for the rest of us, we won't be able to see it. But of course, it still has a major effect. And eclipses, I always say, are game changers. When we have an eclipse, it either is a prelude to a very big event that will have life-changing properties, or it marks one that has just gone by. And we have two eclipses. Eclipses come in pairs. We have the solar eclipse on the 25th and 26th of December, and we have another one looming ahead of us on the 10th of January. And that's important too because it's just prior to the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So this is why I called my video to you, we're living in life-changing times, because these kind of influences really are. I also, I suppose, want to talk a little bit about the properties of Jupiter because it's tied into this eclipse. Jupiter is both a planet of increase, but it's also a planet of inflation. So we could say the good get fantastic, off the wall, fabulous, but the bad, well, things can often get rather out of control if you put Jupiter in the mix. And I think this means that this period coming up, these next couple of weeks, in fact, are a make or break time for many of us. Some of the things we've been grappling with or working towards, they're at that point where they're going to happen. And perhaps if we're feeling the pressures, then we're probably going to feel them just a little bit more over this 2-week period, is why I call it a make or break period. Now, let's get a little bit more into the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. As I said, I'll be taking my time with this, so we'll do it over the next couple of videos. Perhaps I'll deal with things a little bit more personally, but because at the moment I want to have a look at it in terms of what it might mean on the world stage, which of course is my area of great interest. And first of all, we need to begin at the beginning, which is the nature of Saturn and Pluto. These are two mighty planets. Saturn's keywords are crystallization, constriction and construction, and Pluto's keywords are elimination and transformation. So you put these two together and you've got a mighty boulder moving exercise. So we could look at Saturn and its dominion over the establishment, institutions that are that have been there forever and are also in place to give us structure in our lives. So we look at politics, we look at governments, we look at constitutions, monarchies. things like the police force, the military, not the economy per se, but more to do with the treasury and banking. These are all dominions, these are all institutions of which Saturn has dominion over. And then you throw Pluto into the mix, which is elimination and transformation, then you've got a lot of moving and shaking going on in all those establishments, the pillars of the establishment in, well, across the world. Saturn and Pluto take about 35 years to meet in the same place, to meet on the same degree of the zodiac. So it's a pretty long cycle. And the reason for that is that Saturn is moving at one speed and Pluto at another, which is why they are so rarely in conjunction. And the last time they were in conjunction was in 1982. And we need to go back to that year because it gives us a very good kind of idea about, well, not necessarily what to expect because we never get an identikit experience, but there is a resonance. Every time a Saturn-Pluto conjunction takes place, it resonates with the one before it and the one before that and the one before that, and so on. So if you were born in 1947, you were also born on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, actually a conjunction in Leo. And if you were born in 1914, then you were born on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the sign of Cancer. And so when 2020 comes along with another Saturn-Pluto conjunction, then this becomes a really, really important year for you. A lot of things that have been simmering, maybe for years and years and years, really come to the fore. And you could look at this in a positive way. Maybe if you have a lifelong ambition and you've been working hard towards the fulfillment of that ambition, Pam, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is just the material with which to make that transformation happen. But also things that have been incubating for a long period of time, they also come to fruition in a Saturn-Pluto conjunction year. And I will talk about this again, maybe a little bit later on, but I want to say that although we're looking at 2020 as the year, and we're looking at the event itself, which is on January the 12th and 13th, really and truly, we've been living with a Saturn-Pluto conjunction since the end of January 2019, and we will be living with a Saturn-Pluto conjunction to the end of 2020. So it's really a big 2-year cycle, and we've already seen a lot of things that have to do with that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, the kind of redistribution of power, the changing boundaries, the bringing up of situations that have been incubating for years, and they're shaking the establishment. And we've had evidence of that during 2019. And I covered some of these because they were at this influence was at its strongest in July, August, and then in October, early November. And if you remember, those were periods when there was the new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was voted in as the new Prime Minister, and Brexit was rumbling along. Parliament was being cancelled and brought back, and new laws were being created. And that was in Britain, but of course, over in the US, we had that huge process going on, which has only just recently come to a kind of important stage of the impeachment of Donald Trump. And of course, during this same period, August and October, we had all the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein and everything that came out of that, including the involvement of Prince Andrew. So you can see how that Saturn-Pluto works. It goes back years. Stuff that's been going on for years now reaches that point where it's all being churned around. Okay, so you're born in 1982, you're born in 1947, or just those years are important. Why should 2020 be important? Let me take you to somebody who was born in 1982. Oh, that actually wasn't, that is Princess Kate, by the way, but I wanted to go to Prince William, first of all. He was born in 1982 when the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was toing and froing from exactitude, as we say. He was also born on a solar eclipse, and this is really, really important for him because the degree of his moon is 4 degrees of Cancer, and the Jupiter conjunction to the solar eclipse coming up in these next few days is at 4 degrees of Capricorn. So it's really illuminating his moon and his solar eclipse, which was present on the day of his birth. Now, for him, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is going to be mightily important because he has that ingrained in his nativity, in his psyche, if you like. He is born to power. He is born to kingdom. So we are going to see some very important developments during the course of 2020 that relate to his role. And, if we think about the presence of Jupiter in his chart, which is right on the midheaven, right on the point of power, and Jupiter is also involved in all these important solar eclipses, then we can really see that there's going to be developments around this period of time that are going to manifest throughout 2020, and we're going to see some changing in his circumstances that isn't just going to be a house move or a new baby. It's going to be about his role within the royal family. Now, we have this backed up to a certain extent by Princess Kate, his wife, obviously. She also was born in 1982, so she's a Saturn-Pluto girl. And her Saturn-Pluto conjunction was even closer, 21, 26 of Libra here. And she also was born on a lunar eclipse, the sun opposing the moon. So not only do we have William, who's celebrating, a solar eclipse opposing his natal solar eclipse, but we have a lunar eclipse repeating itself in Princess Kate's chart. And of course, that sets a pattern for the year ahead because we have a chart which we call the solar return, which is based on the influences on the day the sun returns to its original place. And this shows in her chart as well. It's a year of powerful change and transformation. Those two good Saturn-Pluto words. Now, if I go back to 1982 and talk about what was happening at the time, we might also get a kind of idea about why 2020 is going to be interesting. There won't be an identikit effect, but there'll be a resonance with that period of time. So back in 1982, Great Britain went to war with Argentina. Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, British territory, and we, Great Britain, went to war to make sure we kept our property, okay? And that was a pretty important deal. And incidentally, of course, Prince Andrew was a key part of that war and was a very brave and noble person at that time. Also in 1982, we remember Margaret Thatcher was in power. The economy, global economy, was in recession. It was a very, very, very difficult time for the world economy. And not only that, the Cold War between the West and the East, Russia, was at a really intense phase. In fact, due to the memoirs of perhaps one of the most famous spies in history that came out a couple of years ago, we only now know how near we came to a nuclear war in 1982 with the accidental explosion of a nuclear missile. But I won't get into that now. But Saturn-Pluto, there is something rather nuclear about that as well. So we touch on it. Doesn't mean it'll happen, but those such things come into the arena up for discussion, okay? Now, if you're born on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, like William and Kate, you have the theme of the times in your chart. And in a way, that's imprinted on your psyche as well. Now, you didn't witness the events of the time, but your parents did. And the times themselves that they were going through also pass like osmosis, if you like, through to your unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is like a great giant sponge. It soaks up all that kind of information, which is why the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, with all its powerful transformational theme, is going to really be brought out in 2020, hopefully in a really, really good way, so that you're able to manifest what it is you're trying to bring into being. It's not easy. I mean, anything involving Saturn and Pluto is not easy. And in terms of manifesting your dreams or your ambitions, Is it ever easy? No, it isn't. You need these mighty, meaty influences to do the job for you. Now, on my website this week, I also wrote about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and I talked about previous eras when Saturn and Pluto are in conjunction. And the one I made the most of was 1517. Yes, do you remember it well? I should think not. But what was significant about 1517 was that it was when the Reformation began. And the Reformation technically began in 1517 when Martin Luther published his 95 Theses. And these were an attack on the papacy, on the Catholic Church. And of course, what happened in the wake of that, with a lot of other kind of revelations and movements, was that there was a whole reshaping of the religious and political landscape and a whole redistribution of power. And the reason I went back to 1517 and the Reformation was that my keyword principle for the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is reformation, or reformation, if you like. There's a lot of boundaries going to change, a lot of nations going to redistribute power within its nation, and also things that will happen in terms of conflict as well, where we'll see the redistribution of the land. And we may indeed, tied into those eclipses, see some real redistribution of the land in terms of earth movements or landslips or volcanoes, things like that. That, well, of course, earthquakes happen all the time. Every day we have an earthquake. But these would be a little more powerful in order to actually change the landscape, so to speak. And just by the by, if you're really interested in the combination of eclipses and full moons and new moons and earthquakes, I've written a very big piece in what I call my newsletters on the website, so you can get that and have a real look at the evidence about that if you happen to be interested. So here we are at the end of my video to you, which is going to take you through Christmas week, or at least part of Christmas week. And it may seem that I haven't really been, this is not a jolly message, but I think by the time I sort of came to the end of talking about this, such an important kind of event that's set to come in our lives, really, and we're working through at the moment, that one of the things about this that we can look at Christmas and its sense of joy about is that when times are hard and when we're struggling with something individually, or whether we look out on the world stage and think, oh, is it ever going to settle down? We can at least, what it does is it accentuates the good things that are in our lives, the importance of love, of the people we love and who love us. And I guess if there is a Christmas message, it is always about love. So I'm contrasting that spirit of love with the effects of these mightily important times, astrological times certainly, that we're living in. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to being here again, either in a week's time or maybe just a little bit before that. Again, thank you for watching.